In this episode of Slowboat Sailing, you will see Linus and Daly sail to Fatu Hiva, and you'll learn the anchoring secrets of the Bay of Virgins. Subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so you can see all our around the world vlogs when they come out and other videos of interest to cruising sailors. It's about 43 nautical miles from Vaitahu, Tahuata, where I was anchored, to the Bay of Virgins, Hanave, and Fatu Hiva. But mostly it's upwind. So I wanted to get an early start, and I would only motor into the trades if I was running out of time. It was a pleasant sail, gave me some time to fix the depth sounder by putting in more antifreeze into it. But as the day wore on, I had to turn on the motor and motor straight into Hanave to avoid entering that unfamiliar harbor after dark. Coming into the Bay of Virgins here in Fatu Hiva. There are 4 boats, and I hope there's enough room for us to anchor. To many, the Bay of Virgins is one of the most beautiful anchorages in the world, but it's also one of the trickiest, with very little swinging room and very deep water. I'm here for the Bay of Virgins in Fatu Hiva after an upwind sail from Tahuata in the Marquesas. Thankfully, there was some room to drop the hook in the 40-foot depths. Believe the guides, the 40-foot depths in the Bay of Virgins of Fatu Hiva are probably the best shot if you don't want to put out 400 feet of chain. For me, I have 200 feet of chain, and I really didn't want to put out any of my road, probably about 80 feet of road. The cats here anchored in relatively shallow depths, I think one in 30 feet and one in 20 feet from what I was estimating. I was trying to really fine tune it. There's really only enough room for 2 boats, maybe 3 boats or 4 if you really squeeze in the 40-foot depths, but truly only 2 boats if you want to have no chance of them touching. And so I think we have really 2 boats in the 40-foot depths, me and another sailboat monohull beside me. The thing about Pacific anchorages is you don't have to have long dinghy rides. The bad thing is that you don't have much room to anchor either. So in the Pacific, there's rarely long shelves except if you're in an atoll or something like that. And so in the Marquesas, with these volcanic islands, the depths oftentimes increase relatively quickly as the shelf is relatively steep. So in the Bahamas, everybody wanted to have a big dinghy motor because the anchorages were so large, because the depths were pretty uniform. But in the Marquesas, you really don't need a big dinghy, but you do need a lot of chain. So you might put out 200 feet of chain, but you might have a 600 feet dinghy ride to the dinghy dock. Too bad. I think we had like 4-foot waves, and we were actually able to go to 4 to 5 knots, just bashing into them with the motor. I tried being close hauled early on, and that just didn't work out. and it would have taken too long, and I would have had to come in at dark, which would have been really a bad idea. And so I'm so glad that I just took the direct route from Tahuata. On the leeward side of Tahuata, it's only about a 30 to 40 mile trip, and most boats can make that in relatively normal conditions, I would say, just bashing into it. Most people would prefer to come here after their Pacific crossing. The downside is that the gendarmes don't allow that. That's illegal. The other problem is that, you know, this is probably not the ideal bay if you're kind of running short of supplies such as fuel and food, and you can get water here, but it's the provisioning is very limited, and there is no fuel, for example. So Fatu Hiva is really the end of the earth as far as the Marquesas and the French Polynesian goes. It's the farthest east of the islands, it's the farthest south of the Marquesas, and it's really remote. It's the only permanently inhabited island in the Marquesas, of which there are 6, which has no airstrip. So the only way to get here is by boat. So it's an experience. If you have the time, everybody says you should do it. I'll let you know, but I'm very excited to be here. Alright, so I picked up anchor this morning because one of the cats moved and there was space in the 20-foot depths. It was a tough pull to get the anchor up here in the Bay of Virgins, because I had 200 feet of chain, and about halfway through that process I definitely tripped me, and so I was floating out to sea, which is okay. Actually, that's kind of a little bit easier to pull, except for if you've got 60 feet of chain, 80 feet of chain dangling. I think it was only 60 for me. That's that chain and the anchor, which is a little bit heavy. I was able to get it up, and then I dropped again, and I dropped about 60 feet of chain. It was clear I was backing down, so I dropped it to kind of in the mid-20s, mid to late 20 depths, and I was gonna I was gonna back down right on a sailboat behind me. So I had to get that up fairly quickly, and that was a little tight. And then the third time I dropped, I was like, I'm gonna drop definitely 20-foot depths. That's really the farthest forward you can drop. And I did do that. I should have dropped it a little north, a little bit more, but you get kind of blown off. And so I was blown off a little, and so about 80 feet from the rocks. So I'll live with that for now, and if I see evidence of dragging, then we'll pick up again and do what needs to be done. If you're in those 50-foot depths and you don't have 300 feet of chain to roll out, you really want to have somebody on the boat at all times, probably. And for a lot of cruising people, that's not the case, because the ledge really starts at the end of the 30-foot depths, and it's a very steep ledge. And so if you start sliding down it, you slide way down. And obviously then it'll be very hard to hold, and also very hard to get your anchor up because you got so much chain out. So It's a challenging anchorage. You know, I wouldn't recommend going into Fatu Hiva coming straight across the Pacific, even if it is upwind, because the anchorage is so bad. And if you're in the height of the season, it's going to be crowded. So we've had up to 6 people in this anchorage, which was possible, but supposedly there are times when there are 20 people, and it's just a recipe for disaster. So I really understand why the French Polynesians have not made this a port of entry and have discouraged coming here, because you just can't, there's not the capacity here in Fatu Hiva for a huge number of boats. Even the bay in Atuana and Hiva Oa with their bow and stern anchors, it's a flatter bay. And so it's possible to hold more boats even if they are packed in fairly tightly. The best anchorages I've had in terms of ease and protection and not being too crowded are the ones in Tahuata. So I'm here in Fatu Hiva. The Bay of Virgins is actually the best anchorage. The other one's supposed to be worse. And in terms of swell, it's not so bad. But Tahuata has a lot of anchorages away from the prevailing winds, and there's not much swell on the leeward side of that island. So it's a pretty nice place if you just want to anchor and rest. And it's so close to Hiva Oa. It's a good option if you just want to rest for a few days. After recovering from the re-anchoring fiasco, I went into town to explore. Like most of the Marquesas, Hanave has a concrete breakwater that has a little bit of swell, but I had seen worse. Dinghy landings on these concrete breakwaters in the Marquesas are always interesting, and you have to be prepared if you have a soft-sided dinghy to have a dinghy anchor to keep it off the concrete. The awash stumps act as a depth marker, and obviously there are many hazards if you get to anchor too close to shore. Hanave is such a small village. I tried to walk down every street, and I ended up walking almost into someone else's yard. Luckily, it was the yard of Timon the artist, who also had some awesome grapefruits. Pamplemous is the French word for the green grapefruits that are sweet and delicious.
Vraiment a dish.
Do you always carve in rosewood?
Rosewood.
So, how much would a statue like that be?
$4.
I asked that Timon hold the tiki and the pamplemous until I got back from my hike. I had seen the Slowboat Sailing Podcast episode 29 guests chase the story, do a quick hike from Hanave to the cell phone tower, which towers above the bay to the south. The road splits up. I think I'm going to take the up path, dirt track, but I'm going to go up. It's a pretty steep climb once the road starts climbing. The shrine to Mary may offer some water if you're thirsty. I was not adventurous enough to try it. The Marquesas is blessed with a lot of water, but it's always best to find out if the locals are willing to drink it, because it can be contaminated by other animals. I'm not aware of any island in the Marquesas that treats its tap water. About midway up the climb, if you look back, you can get a glimpse of the waterfall, which we will hike to in the next episode. I've come to where the paved road ends and the dirt and gravel road begins. I'm hoping it's leading to the cell phone tower on the top of one of these peaks, and not, oh my, the village to the south. Otherwise it'll be a very long walk. But I'll get a view at the top and be able to figure out which direction I'm headed. My walk in the clouds rewarded me with a beautiful view of the Bay of Virgins from above, and I could just make out Contango as I peered at the edge of the cliff. Okay, so once you've got to the peak with the earth mover on it, then if you want to go to the peak with the cell phone tower on it and, I don't know, do some internet, then you need to follow the barbed wire trail, which is really a trail, not a road, and that is right underneath where the earth mover's plateau is. So you'll see it as if you stay on the road, you'll see where you've missed it by looking across at the cell phone tower. Having reached my objective, it was time to climb back down and collect the pamplemous and tiki and enjoy the evening with my beloved dog Daly. Next time on Slow Boat Sailing, you'll see me hike to the waterfall in Fatu Hiva and hike from Ome, the southern village in Fatu Hiva, to Hanave. Subscribe so you can see our monthly round-the-world sailing vlogs that are released the first Thursday of every month at 5 p.m. New York City time. This episode was supported by Mantis anchors and viewers like you on patreon.com/slowboatsailing. Go there to get great rewards, including bonus episodes to the podcast and free audiobooks for patrons. I talked to Greg Cutson of Mantis Anchors about why weight in the tip of the Mantis anchor is so important.
The main issue I perceived with anchors was not really ultimate holding power. The reason they failed was because they never really properly set first place. So very rarely, 25 knots, you're overpowering a well-set anchor. We wanted to create something that guaranteed a universal set. As a cruiser, when you go around, you find unique locations that are really hard to get an anchor to bite, and we solved that problem.
Go to mantisanchors.com to order yours for a better night's sleep.